There's a version of the story you've never been told. Not because it was hidden, but because no one wanted you to remember what it actually meant. You've heard the name 1,000 times. You've seen the imagery. The teachings were given to you softly, gently, wrapped in ritual and tradition. But somewhere along the way, something essential was removed. Not from the texts, from you. Because the original message wasn't about worship. It wasn't about following, it was about waking up. And the moment you truly understand what was being said, everything you thought you knew about identity, reality, and control begins to fracture. This isn't a story about religion, it's a story about consciousness. About a messenger who arrived inside a system that had forgotten itself. A system that called itself the world, the truth, the only way things could be. And this messenger didn't bring new rules, he brought a kind of disruption. A way of seeing that short-circuited the entire operating system. They called him radical, dangerous, blasphemous. But that's what happens when you remind people they're not who they think they are. When you show them that the walls are made of belief, not stone. When you offer them something they can't accept, because accepting it would mean everything they built their lives on was a game they didn't even know they were playing. So the story was rewritten. Adjusted, made safe, made distant, made into something you could believe in without it ever changing you. But what if the original signal is still there, waiting underneath? What if the messenger wasn't speaking to followers at all, but to prisoners who didn't yet realize they were inside something? Every system has a logic, a way of organizing reality that feels natural, inevitable, unquestionable. The system he walked into had priests, laws, prophecies. It had heavens and hells, clean and unclean, chosen and condemned. It had answers for everything, and everyone inside it believed those answers were the structure of existence itself. Then this figure appears. He doesn't arrive with credentials. He doesn't quote the authorities to legitimize himself. He just starts speaking. And the way he speaks is strange. He tells stories that sound simple on the surface, but if you actually listen, they undo the entire framework. He touches the untouchable. He eats with the excluded. He keeps saying things like, "The kingdom is within you," and no one seems to register what that actually means. Because if it's within, then it's not out there. Not in the temple, not in the ritual, not in the hierarchy. And if it's not out there, then the whole system, the whole structure of control, the whole identity you were given becomes optional. Becomes a costume you're wearing without realizing it. He's not teaching religion. He's teaching a kind of disidentification, a way of stepping outside the program that defines you. But the people around him keep trying to fit him into the old categories. Is he a prophet? A king? A threat? They keep asking him to clarify, to choose a side, to fit into their map of reality. And he refuses, over and over. Because the point isn't to replace one system with another. The point is to show that you're not the character the system told you that you are. But if you're not that character, then who are you? And what happens when you stop playing the role? He speaks in riddles, parables, images that feel familiar but somehow inverted. A rich man can't enter the kingdom. The first shall be last. You have to lose your life to find it. To those who have, more will be given. To those who have not, even what they have will be taken away. On the surface, these sound like moral teachings, advice for how to behave, but there's something else happening. He's describing a psychological structure, a pattern of consciousness that most people are living inside without knowing it. The rich man hoarding his wealth isn't just about money, it's about identity. The self that clings, that accumulates, that builds walls of mine and me and what I deserve. And that self, no matter how much it gathers, can never enter the space he's pointing to, because that space only opens when the clinging stops. Losing your life to find it isn't sacrifice, it's recognition. The life you think you're living, the one made of roles and comparisons and fears and defenses, that's not your life. That's the character you were given by the world, and the world built that character to keep you inside its logic, inside its game. He keeps saying, "You've heard it said, but I say to you." And each time he takes a rule, a belief, a commandment that everyone treats as absolute, and he reveals it as a construct, something built, something maintained by agreement, something you can see through if you're willing to look. But looking means questioning everything, the authorities, the traditions, The voice in your head that sounds like you but might just be the program running. And the program doesn't like being seen, it doesn't like being questioned, because if you see it, you can step outside it. And if you step outside it, you're no longer controllable. They start calling him possessed, deceived, dangerous, because what he's saying can't be absorbed into the existing framework. It's not just a different interpretation, it's a different operating system entirely, and you can't run two operating systems at once. The religious leaders confront him. They test him. They try to trap him with questions designed to force him into contradiction. But he doesn't answer the way they expect. He flips the questions back. He exposes the assumptions underneath. He refuses to play by rules he didn't agree to. This is what happens when someone speaks from outside the program. To those inside, it looks like chaos, like rebellion, like madness. Because the program defines sanity. It defines what's real, what's acceptable, what's true, and anyone who operates outside those definitions becomes a threat to the entire structure. But here's the deeper pattern. He's not just challenging them, he's showing them their own reflection. Every time they accuse him, he's mirroring back their own imprisonment, their own fear, their own desperate need to be right, to be in control, to be the gatekeepers of truth. And they can't see it, because seeing it would mean recognizing that they too are inside something, that their authority, their certainty, their entire identity is a role they're playing inside a system that has no ultimate ground. It's just agreements stacked on agreements, all the way down. He tells them, "You search the scriptures thinking that in them you have eternal life, but you refuse to come to me." And what he's really saying is, you've mistaken the map for the territory. You've mistaken the symbols for the thing itself. You're guarding the door, but you've forgotten what the door was for. But if they're guarding the door and he's saying the door itself is an illusion, then what happens when someone walks through? There's a moment in the story that everyone remembers, but almost no one understands. He's in the garden. He knows what's coming. He's about to be arrested, tortured, executed. And he says something strange. He says, "Not my will, but yours." Most people read this as submission, obedience, a son accepting his father's plan. But there's another layer. He's demonstrating the dissolution of the separate self, the I that wants, that resists, that clings to its own survival. That I is the illusion, and in that moment he's showing what happens when you stop identifying with it. This is the core of the Gnostic reading. The world, the system, the matrix of control, it all runs on identification. You think you're this body, this name, this history, this collection of memories and desires and fears, and as long as you think that, you're trapped. Because that self is mortal, it can be threatened, it can be manipulated, it can be made to comply. But if you realize you're not that self, then the system loses its leverage. It can threaten the body, but it can't threaten you. Because you are not the body. You are not the character. You are what's aware of the character. And that awareness can't be touched. This is why they kill him. Not because he broke a religious law, not because he challenged political power, but because he embodied a way of being that makes the entire control structure irrelevant. He's showing that death itself, the ultimate fear, the final weapon of the system, is just another illusion. And then he comes back, not as a ghost, not as a reward, but as proof. Proof that the self you thought you were was never real to begin with. That consciousness doesn't end when the character ends. That you were never inside the game. You were always outside it, just convinced you were playing. But what does it mean to live from that realization? And why is that possibility still so terrifying? Centuries pass, the message spreads, but something happens along the way. The institutions form, the hierarchies rebuild, the message gets translated, edited, contextualized, and slowly, carefully, the most dangerous part is removed. Not the miracles, not the sacrifice, not the resurrection. Those can be kept, those can be worshipped. Those can be turned into doctrine, into ritual, into something external that you believe in rather than something internal that you become. What gets removed is the instruction manual. The part that says you can do this too. The part that says the kingdom is within you. The part that says you are not who you think you are, and the world is not what it appears to be, and you have the capacity to wake up right now. That part becomes heresy. It becomes Gnosticism. It becomes the texts that get buried, the teachings that get condemned, the interpretations that get erased. Because if people realize they don't need an intermediary, don't need an institution, don't need permission to access their own consciousness, then the entire power structure collapses. So the story is inverted. The messenger who came to free you from external authority becomes the ultimate external authority. The one who said the kingdom is within you becomes the one you have to go through to get to the kingdom. The teacher of awakening becomes the object of belief, and belief is the opposite of awakening. Belief says, accept this without questioning. Awakening says, question everything, including yourself. Belief builds identity. Awakening dissolves it. Belief needs followers. Awakening produces no one to follow because there's no one left to lead. This is the great reversal. The message designed to free consciousness gets turned into a tool for controlling it. And most people never notice because they're given the character in the story, not the consciousness that the story is pointing to. But the original signal is still there, underneath the layers, waiting. And when you start to see it, you can't unsee it. The question is, are you ready to see what it reveals? Here's the trap. You're told to have faith, to believe, to accept. And if you question, if you doubt, if you look too closely, you're told you're losing your way, that you're being deceived, that you're falling into darkness. But what if the doubt is the door? What if the questioning is the path? What if everything you were told to accept without thinking is exactly what needs to be examined? This is the double bind the system creates. It tells you that truth is found through surrender. But surrender to what? To an institution, to a book, to an interpretation. And who gets to decide which interpretation is correct? The ones in power, the ones who benefit from your compliance. The messenger didn't say, believe in me. He said, follow me. And following doesn't mean obedience, it means walking the same path, undergoing the same transformation, dissolving the same illusions. He was demonstrating a process, not demanding worship. But the moment you turn a process into an object of worship, you stop the process, you stop moving, you stop questioning, you stop waking up. You build a statue instead of becoming what the statue represents. And this is where the alien metaphor becomes useful. Not because he was literally from another world, but because his consciousness was operating from a completely different framework. He wasn't inside the system's logic. He was outside it, looking in. And when you're outside, you can see the pattern. You can see how it works. You can see the machinery of control that seems invisible from the inside. He called it the world, the cosmos, the archons, the powers and principalities. And he said, my kingdom is not of this world. Not because it's somewhere else in space or time, but because it's a different order of reality, a different mode of consciousness, one that the world, the system, the matrix cannot touch. But accessing that kingdom requires letting go of the identity the world gave you, and that identity will fight to survive. It will use every tool, every fear, every belief, even the story of the messenger himself, twisted just enough to keep you from becoming what he became. So the question isn't, do you believe? The question is, are you willing to die to who you think you are? You've been here before. Not in this exact moment, but in this pattern, this cycle, this repetition. You wake up a little, you see something, a crack in the story, a moment of clarity, and then the world rushes back in, the noise, the obligations, the roles, and you forget again. This is the structure of the system. It doesn't need to stop you from waking up. It just needs to make you forget. Over and over. It gives you glimpses, just enough to keep you searching, but never enough to fully break free. Because if you fully broke free, you'd stop participating. You'd stop feeding it. You'd stop believing in it. The messenger knew this. He talked about it constantly. The seeds that fall on rocky ground, the ones that sprout quickly but have no root, the lamp that's covered by a basket, the treasure buried in the field that no one recognizes. He wasn't talking about other people, he was talking about you, about the pattern you keep repeating. You hear the truth. You feel it. You know somewhere deep that something is off, that the life you're living isn't the life you're meant for, that the identity you're carrying is too small, too heavy, too false. But then you go back to it. Because it's familiar, because it's safe, because everyone else is doing it, and stepping outside means being alone. And the system counts on this. It counts on your fear of isolation, Your fear of being wrong, your fear of losing the comforts, the securities, the sense of belonging that comes from staying inside the program. But here's the deeper truth. The isolation you're afraid of is already here. You're already alone, pretending to be connected. You're already lost, pretending to have direction. You're already dead, pretending to be alive. And the life he's pointing to isn't about adding something new. It's about removing what was never real. The question is, how many more times will you circle this loop before you stop? How many more lifetimes will you spend inside the same pattern, the same forgetting, the same comfortable unconsciousness? And what would it take for you to finally let it break? There's a reason most people don't wake up. It's not because they can't. It's because waking up costs everything. Every certainty, every identity, every relationship built on shared illusions, every source of meaning that depends on the world being what you thought it was. The messenger didn't promise comfort. He promised a sword. He said, "I came to bring division." Not because he wanted conflict, but because consciousness divides. It separates truth from pretense. It separates the real from the performed. And when you start living from that separation, everyone around you feels it. They feel the question you're asking just by existing. The question they're not ready to face. This is why the Gnostics were hunted, why the mystics were burned, why every tradition that points to direct knowing, to inner authority, to the dissolution of the self, gets suppressed, because it's dangerous, not to the people, to the system, to the structure that depends on you not knowing, not questioning, not waking up. And it's not just external. The resistance is internal too. You have voices in your head that sound like reason, like caution, like wisdom. They tell you to slow down, to be realistic, to not go too far, to keep one foot in the world. And those voices are the program defending itself. They're the system speaking through you, using your own thoughts to keep you inside. He called it denying yourself, picking up your cross, dying daily. And that's not metaphor, it's instruction. The self you think you are, the one that wants to survive, to be comfortable, to be right, that self has to be seen through, not destroyed, not transcended, just seen, recognized as a construct, a useful fiction, a temporary character in a play you never auditioned for. But seeing through it means you can't hide in it anymore. You can't use it as an excuse. You can't blame it when things go wrong. You become responsible for consciousness itself. And that responsibility is crushing until you realize there's no you to carry it. So the cost is everything. And what you get in return is nothing. No rewards, no guarantees. Just the strange, quiet, terrifying freedom of not being who you thought you were. Is that a trade you're willing to make? Or will you keep circling, keep searching, keep waiting for a version of the truth that doesn't ask so much? He's been here the whole time. Not as a person, not as a memory, as a pattern, a possibility, a signal running underneath the noise. Every time you feel that strange discomfort, that sense that something isn't right, that something was forgotten, it's there. Every time you question the story you've been living, the identity you've been performing, the world you've been accepting, it's there. The simulation, the matrix, the system, whatever you want to call it, it's held together by agreement, by collective belief, by millions of people choosing every day to identify with the character instead of the awareness, to believe in the walls instead of seeing through them, to stay inside instead of remembering there was never an outside to begin with. And the messenger, the signal, the hack, it's still running, still offering the same invitation, not to follow, not to worship, but to become, to undergo the same dissolution, to die to the false and discover what's left when the false is gone. You don't need permission. You don't need initiation. You don't need another person to tell you it's real. You just need to stop. Stop defending. Stop explaining. Stop pretending. Stop believing in the character the world built for you. And in that stopping, something opens. Not a place, not a feeling, just a recognition. That you were never who you thought you were. That the game was never mandatory. That consciousness itself is the kingdom, and it was never anywhere but here. The story didn't end. It keeps happening in different forms, different times, different faces, but the same pattern, the same awakening, the same choice, to stay inside the loop or to see it for what it is. He didn't save you. He showed you how to save yourself, and the moment you truly understand that, there's nothing left to save. The door was always open. You just had to stop believing in the walls.